Welcome into the Saints Insider Podcast. Today is Friday, January the 17th. I'm Zach Ewing with Matthew Paris, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan today. And what else are we talking about? We're talking about coaching search. The Saints are looking for a head coach still. We thought today we would drill down and have each of you gentlemen make your case for one candidate. Not necessarily your top candidate, but just so that I think in two cases at least it is your top candidate. And then maybe, Luke, you had to take the next best guy available.
Yeah, but I've talked myself into him, so
okay,
let's go.
All right, so we're going to play GM today. First, want to let you know that Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. We're also going to end the show, by the way, with our divisional round predictions to see if Jeff can get any worse on his predictions this year.
I believe my preseason pick of the Saints was brilliant.
When that's your only thing to hang your hat on,
that's the most important one. We've established that was the most important one.
I heard you whining to Jim Derry on his podcast about how we make fun of you on this podcast.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Like
I did hear that.
on me.
I feel jilted, like you went on another podcast and complained about it.
Well, I mean, I get treated with respect on that podcast, unlike this crew.
Jeff Duncan,
you get what you deserve.
Picked the Saints 6-11, and they went 5-12.
I got to buy you all dinner one night to get this respect.
Maybe you should.
Fair.
The light bulb came on.
That's
Jeff
fair.
figured it out.
That's fair.
All right, we're going to take a break here. We're going to let some of the steam cool off, and then we'll be back with our. I'm kidding about that. We'll be back with our cases for the Saints' next head coach right after this.
Nice bike.
Thanks. Can I get it back before Saturday?
That might be tough.
Whoa. Is it just you?
For now, let's take a look.
Can you reach that? How about?
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, welcome back to the Saints Insider. So if you look at offshore betting markets, which I hesitate, they're illegal, first of all, and they get some funny money, but it's the only thing we've kind of got from an outside perspective as to who the favorites are for the Saints head coaching search. But I think it probably tracks with what we think, too. The three favorites here are Aaron Glenn, Mike McCarthy, and Joe Brady. Do we all agree with that?
Yes, I think so.
I think that it is more likely than not that the Saints' next head coach is one of those three guys. So since there are three of you, we split this up, and we're going to start with you, Matt, and you chose Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn as your choice to be the Saints' next head coach.
I did. I think the job that he's done in Detroit, particularly of late, has been really impressive. I think that he would be the kind of energy the Saints need. That's after covering last season, there just was kind of a lack of excitement, lack of attention to detail from the defense. The way that he's been able to go about coaching the Lions without many of his star players. They've been hurt all over the place. And, you know, it's interesting. If you actually look statistically at Aaron Glenn, not to shoot down my own argument here, but stats-wise, the Lions' defense isn't all that impressive outside this year. But I think sometimes we get too lost with the numbers because if you would have shown DA's numbers prior to being hired, I think you would have said, wow, this is a slam dunk. And I do think DA deserved the Saints job in 2022, but I just don't know how much you can let that factor into the Saints decision this time around. I think they need a quality leader, a smart defensive mind, and I do think he can command the room. You listen to what Dan Campbell and them have to say, among the best leaders they've ever been around. Like, just high praise for the guy all over the place. And the fact that he's in demand, too, he's one of the most in-demand candidates this cycle. I think it'd be a home run if the Saints got him, honestly.
I think the only job that hasn't requested him, and I might even be wrong on this, is the Raiders.
I think they did.
So the only one
well,
he did.
I guess the Cowboys would be the
he-
one now.
Yeah, the only one he didn't interview for
It's the Patriots.
was the Patriots.
And he
'cause
said no.
He said no because of their sham Rooney Rule.
Yes.
Didn't want to be a part of that, but yeah, I mean, definitely one of the most highly sought after coaches in this cycle for sure.
And I think your point, Matt, I think the most important thing I think everyone learned probably from the Dennis Allen experiment is it doesn't matter how good you are as a coordinator. What the Saints need is a great head coach, right? Your point about him being a strong leader. If you want to ring the bell, I mean, he's a Parcells disciple, Aaron Glenn, played for Parcells, coached under, so that's what I think they need. I think they need a strong leader in that building. I'm not going to say the word because I've been ridiculed for saying
And we
it
have to
so
ring the
many
bell
times.
again.
Yeah.
He's more than a beta. put it that way.
Alpha.
He's more than a beta.
The kids say Sigma now, which I don't understand, but Sigma is the new
But
alpha.
you hear a lot of good things about Aaron Glenn, and I think it's going to be hard for them to get him. I think everybody thought, it's a kind of a slam dunk, but I think he's going to be, a man in demand because of what he's done there. I could care less about their defensive statistics. They need somebody to come in and, in particular, in the Saints organization, that I think has a dearth right now of leadership.
And even with the statistics, like, you want someone who can still scheme up your team and take advantage of the matchup. And what they did relatively recently against the Minnesota Vikings, they provided the blueprint for Sean McVay and the Rams the following week. They shut down Sam Darnold and honestly cost Sam Darnold a lot of money in free agency. Like, that's how impressive of a coaching job that was. So I think he gets his guys to play hard. I think there would be a lot of energy from that. And, I kind of think it helps that he has familiarity with the Saints. We talk about whether they need a clean break from Sean Payton. And one, I don't necessarily know if that's a bad thing. But two, having experience in other organizations, particularly Detroit, where they've built it from the ground up, I think you can come in here, provide some fresh new ideas, but also have some familiarity with how the Saints work in case he needs to navigate that.
I think, too, we talk about the strong points with Rizzy. We've talked about that for months. It's like, hey, he's kind of a mini Dan Campbell, where he can get his players to play hard, and he's not worried about one side of the ball over the other, and he's more of an emotional leader. Aaron Glenn's been under Dan Campbell. He's seen what works. I think that's probably rubbed off on him in some respects. But now Matt mentioned the statistics. Is that the only rebuttal for Aaron Glenn is, hey, he hasn't been a head coach before, and his defenses statistically haven't been that great, or is there some other reason to doubt?
So I think I would say this with any defensive-minded head coach. I don't think they should be disqualified by any stretch, but there are, in my opinion, more challenges when you're a defensive-minded head coach to sustain success. If your offense is no good, your team's not going anywhere, and you're going to have to hire a new offensive coordinator. If your offense is really good, teams are going to poach away your offensive coordinator, and you're going to have to replace your offensive coordinator because that's what teams are looking for. I think it's really, really, really hard as a defensive-minded head coach to sustain success because of that.
Yeah.
I think you look at the coaches in the playoffs right now. Who are the defensive-minded head coaches who are remaining in the divisional round? It's Sean McDermott, Dan Quinn,
D'Amico Ryans.
right. So these three guys have an offensive coordinator who was the hot, young, bright, young coaching mind last year in Bobby Slowick in Houston. Cliff Kingsbury, who is telling people he doesn't want to take a head coaching job this time around. His first year on the job, but will probably be a head coach at some point in the next 2 years. And then the Bills are like the outlier, but even them, Brian Daboll was poached away, and then Joe Brady is probably going to be a head coach this cycle. We're going to talk about him in a little bit. And look, it's a little easier to sustain it if you're Buffalo or Washington or Houston, when you've got superstar young quarterback potential, you know, in Jaden Daniels and CJ Stroud, or legitimate and Josh Allen, it's a little bit easier to maintain. But like, I think when you're in the Saints position, you don't have like superstar quarterback. It's harder to make. You have to have like good, strong offensive foundation. It's harder to maintain when you're the defensive head coach.
And the other thing is, I guess not a rebuttal, but we really don't know what his offensive philosophy would be as a head coach, right? I mean, we don't know what kind of system he'd want to run, you know, who he'd want. Does he have somebody in mind? Is there someone on the Lions staff that's, you know, an immediate guy that would maybe be his offense? We don't really know that in any way because he hasn't stepped. So I think that is a question for Aaron Glenn.
Yeah, and I think the star quarterback kind of corollary is an important one because if you look, you know, even going back 30 years at defensive coaches who were able to sustain success, notably Bill Belichick, they all had star quarterbacks. That's the only way they were able to sustain success. There's no star quarterback in New Orleans. You know, I think Derek Carr's solid. He's never been a star, and he's a short-term solution anyway. So if you got a defensive head coach, I think you would have to hit a home run in the draft with a quarterback at some point soon.
I would say that's true for any coach they hire, though. Like
Maybe so.
I
Yeah.
think Joe Brady or Kellen Moore or Mike McCarthy, like those guys are going to have some work to do. I mean, I think Derek Carr is very serviceable, but if we're talking about getting to the playoffs and sustained success, you're going to need someone new in there anyway.
Tomlin's sustained.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Ben Roethlisberger for the majority.
Yeah,
of
and
his-
after Roethlisberger,
They're still winning.
they're making the
double
playoffs.
digits
They're not
every
doing
year.
anything once they get
I
there.
mean, they're
Yeah.
sustained success. They're the
That's true.
definition
That's a
of
good
it.
point.
But
He may be the
Pete
outlier.
Carroll, was Pete Carroll count?
I think Pete Carroll to me falls more into like the CEO, like kind of like Dan Campbell or
John
Harbaugh, because Pete Carroll, I don't think he called defensive plays for the last 10 years he was a head coach.
Did
Maybe
he call them
longer.
at all in Seattle? Am I?
Well, no, but
Early,
the point
maybe.
is,
Maybe late
he's
when
having to
he-
hire an offensive-minded, you know, an offensive coordinator. He's not. That's not his role. So I mean, they
Yeah,
still.
yeah.
Were,
I
they
mean,
were
no,
good
it's.
for
I
a
mean,
long
it is.
time.
But that's the thing. Like, it is, and like, who knows? Mike McCarthy might not even. Like, Mike McCarthy might want to hire a play caller. I don't know because he
Right.
didn't do it his entire time in Dallas.
Right, that's
So
a good point.
Well, I was going to kind of. That's a good transition. You say that any coach would need a star quarterback, and maybe that's true. But our next guy is Mike McCarthy, and he has pretty objectively made every quarterback he's worked with better throughout his career, going all the way back to Brett Favre, and then in New Orleans, I was going to say Aaron Brooks in New Orleans. So, Jeff, you're going to take Mike McCarthy here and make your case for him. He's kind of, in a lot of ways, the opposite of Aaron Glenn. He's older. He's been around the block several times. He's an offensive coach. He's more proven, but he's also a retread. So make your case for McCarthy.
Yeah, so like I go back to my time covering him here when he was the offensive coordinator under Jim Haslett, and he did develop a really strong reputation for his work with quarterbacks. I mean, he got his start under like Marty Schottenheimer. I think Paul Hackett was his basically kind of his mentor. So he was strictly a West Coast offensive mind. That's where he came under the West Coast offense. But he had he's a Pittsburgh guy, so within that he was a big proponent, big believer in running the ball. I mean, he grew up in Steelers country. He believes in being tough. That was his big thing here. And but I do remember distinctly doing stories on him back then. This quarterback school that he would have in the off season. I remember talking to Mark Brunell and Matt Hasselbeck and all these guys about just how detail oriented he was in coaching quarterbacks, and had this really good reputation of developing quarterbacks, which I don't really think people know about him now. It's gotten lost, I think, in his head coaching tree, but he certainly did a great job, I think, with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, I've seen, talked about how much he developed under Mike McCarthy here in New Orleans. He made Aaron Brooks into a serviceable NFL quarterback. As soon as Mike left for San Francisco, Aaron Brooks was out of the league 2 years later. He wasn't even in the league anymore. So I think that's a strength of his. But I think more than that, he's been successful. I think 18 years I looked, 12 of them he's had winning seasons and 11 double-digit winning seasons. That doesn't happen by accident. I mean, I know he had Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. I get that. And he went to the Cowboys. But I also think that experience of being in Green Bay, which is a smaller market, kind of a mom-and-pop run organization like the Saints, and then going to Dallas, which is the exact opposite in every way. I mean, I don't know if anybody would have more credentials than Mike coming in here and better experience to navigate what, like Matt said, is going to be there's a lot of work to do here. So I think his experience of going through those two organizations, I think, would be invaluable. But you kind of know what you got with Mike McCarthy. I mean, I think you know what you got. He's obviously won a Super Bowl, but there's not a lot of unknown element to him, which could be good or bad. I think the downside is, like, is he going to be the next shooting star head coach? I mean, I don't think that, you're not going to grab a shooting star with Mike McCarthy. You're kind of you kind of know what you're getting there. So, but he knows the organization. I mean, he's been away a long time, but he definitely knows Mickey Loomis. I know. I think I was on the phone with Loomis. I'm trying to remember this because I want to be accurate about it, but I'm pretty sure I was on the phone with him like a year or two ago, and he was with Mike McCarthy playing golf down in Florida. So they know each other even away from, just NFL circles. And I know he's highly regarded in coaching circles. And that's the thing I always try to go back to with Mike is forget Twitter, forget people. I mean, Mike's an easy guy to kick around. He's not the Sean McVay, right? He doesn't look like Sean McVay or Cliff Kingsbury. He's an easy guy on social media to kick around, but in NFL circles, he's highly respected. And Sean Payton, if you want to ring the bell, Sean Payton, I'm telling you, is a very harsh judge of coaches. I've had many conversations with him. There are not a lot of coaches that Sean really, really respects. I mean, Andy Reid, obviously, Bill Belichick. I mean, the ones you think. He really respects Mike McCarthy. I don't know if that helps his status here or not, but I know he thinks highly of him too.
And you would think by extension that means that Mickey Loomis thinks highly of him. And as you mentioned, they have a relationship that could be helpful or it could be harmful. What are the rebuttals to McCarthy, guys?
I'll start. He's 61 years old. Well, that does not disqualify him. It makes him like, what, a year older than you, Jeff?
Which should be actually a strength.
I
lot
think,
of learning,
I
a lot
think
of
that
life lessons learned.
Would you like to challenge us to
I
prove
think
your
that there's a chance if the Saints are heading for a rebuild that's not necessarily the guy you want leading that, right? If you're not going to be competitive for a couple of years, you want a guy who's by the time you are maybe getting back up there, who's going to be in his mid-60s. And I think the other point that Jeff brought up is a valid one. It's look, he has an incredibly high floor as a head coach. You know exactly what he's going to be. He's won 61% of his games in his lifetime. 12 playoff appearances, a Super Bowl title. Like, there's nobody else like him on the coaching market. But I think there's a lower ceiling with him than some of the other coaches, where you're not going to get the next Sean Payton with Mike McCarthy. You're going to get Mike McCarthy, which, like, good coach, maybe a Hall of Fame coach, but like.
Is this the right situation?
You're not going to get Sean McVay. You're not going to get somebody who is going to come in and potentially redefine an era of Saints football necessarily. So
my worry with it is, and I actually think he would be a good hire.
I think he'd be a great hire.
I would too. But I think my worry with it is, we talked on the show last about the Saints' perception being different than what others view, or are the Saints fooling themselves of where their roster is, etc. That would kind of scare me with the McCarthy hire. Is, do they think this roster is a lot better and they just need that coach to take them to the next level? Or are they tricking themselves of the talent here? And I think McCarthy could do a good job with the talent, all things considered, but I don't know if they'd be on the right timelines, is kind of my concern with that. But I don't think that disqualifies him from any means. And it actually reminds me of the Dan Quinn hire in Washington last year, where everyone crapped on that. I can hit the bell. But that was not the sexy hire by any means. That fan base wanted Ben Johnson, and it turned out very well for them.
That's a really good comparison. I didn't think about that comparison because as Luke was talking, the one thing I would say that would concern me is Mike going to have the energy that it takes for this job here? Because, I mean, I think they need someone with some energy that's fired up, enthusiastic, because it's going to take a lot of work. At this stage of his career, when he came into Dallas, they had a pretty good roster.
No.
It wasn't a rebuilding job like this. Now, he did go to Green Bay when they were struggling, a little bit, but I think this is a much bigger challenge, and I don't know if that kind of, to your point of like, do they match up on their timelines? I don't know. So that would be my concern: is he going to be enthusiastic and into it, and because it's gonna take a lot. And the one thing I would say it's good for him is that he does have the ability historically to hire good coaches, and I think that's important here because even as good as I think Mike is, I mean, you got to have a good staff here. I think that was something that I think Dennis Allen struggled with as a head coach.
I think McCarthy was 6-10 in his first year at both Green Bay and Dallas. I know he was 6-10 in his first year at Dallas. It was something close to that his first year at Green Bay. Second year in Green Bay, he went 13-3, went to the NFC Championship game. Second year in Dallas, he went 12-5. So like he is a coach who he can bring it
if you
about
want
quickly.
immediate improvement, he's probably the safest choice.
He's NFL Doc Rivers.
But is well, except Doc Rivers has never sniffed the championship.
Yeah, he won a title with the Celtics.
Boston.
Oh yeah, that's true. Okay, he
Come on,
did.
man.
Yeah, with a loaded team. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm like. Kind of. We haven't even touched the postseason stuff. I actually think that's a huge concern in the long
you got to
term.
get to the postseason.
If the Saints are
first.
getting to the postseason
But-
and failing, then they're taking that at this point.
Yes, I mean that's why we haven't mentioned it is because the Saints team is not near that right now. But I mean, everyone. I'd be interested to talk to Joe Banner about Mike McCarthy because thinking of people who like just can't stand him on Twitter is Joe Banner, who is the former Philadelphia Eagles GM, very respected around the league, just constantly dunks on McCarthy on Twitter. And he made this point of everyone says, oh, look at the job McCarthy did to rally these guys to 7-10. What a good coaching job. But like they squandered the first half of the season. Like when Dak was healthy, they were underperforming by a lot. So
Yeah, he also made Cooper Rush look like decent.
I think McCarthy's a better coach than the perception is, but the postseason stuff really makes me nervous. And why I compared him to Doc Rivers is just that, like, Doc Rivers, there's a solid baseline. He wears out his welcome. He doesn't perform in the biggest moments the way you would want him to outside one championship year. And is that effective at every stop? Like that, Jeff, you mentioned it earlier, but like the fact that this would be his third coaching job it's a little scary, but I think he's a really good coach too. So
If you want to look at McCarthy postseason failures, just watch a 2014 NFC Championship game.
Well, it sounds like a bitter Packers fan.
yeah,
That was one
one
of
time.
somebody who grew
Still
up
hadn't gotten over it.
as somebody who grew up in Wisconsin. I was looking back at the box from that the other day. And I was having PTSD.
Yeah, that one
Green
was
Bay
brutal.
kicked two field goals of less than 20 yards. By the way, in that game, they blew a 12-point lead in the span of less than 90 seconds.
This is an onside kick, right?
Yeah, they failed to
Who'd they
recover
lose
an
to?
onside
Who
kick.
was it?
Seattle. They scored. They scored a field goal. I think as time expired to send the game into overtime, and then they pulled a Dennis Allen special in overtime and gave up two 35-yard plays back to back.
We're gonna have to pull Luke out of this.
Yeah,
memory.
the second of which
remembers
was a game-winning touchdown in overtime. So,
Was
I
McCarthy-
wasn't bitter about that at all, though.
Was McCarthy the coach? I think he was. You would know the Des Bryant catch.
Yes, that was that playoff run.
Was it really?
Yeah, 2014.
Wow.
Okay, so our third candidate is a little bit different. He's younger. He's an offensive guy. Never been a head coach. He's like Glenn in that case, and to present the case for Joe Brady is Luke.
You want to talk about shooting stars? Let's talk about a coach who is younger than I
You
am,
have a
which
script?
is depressing. Joe Brady is
notes.
35 years old, and we talked about stats and not putting too much weight into stats, but I'm just going to throw some stats out here. This is his Bills offense this year. Number 2 in offensive DVOA, number 3 in EPA per play, number 2 in scoring offense, number 10 in total offense, number 9 in rushing offense, number 9 in passing offense. It's pretty good. Very efficient offensive performance by them. I think they were number 6 in the NFL in yards per play, 6 yards per play this year. So an explosive offense on top of that. Obviously, they have Josh Allen. Josh Allen did not have like this superstar group of receivers to throw to this year. Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir.
Curtis Samuel, ring the bell.
Yeah.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
He didn't get the best out of MVS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's not like Josh Allen obviously is crazy good, but like it's not like they were the Philadelphia Eagles. We could talk about Kellen Moore all we want, but he's got like the Monstars, as his offensive skill position players, plus 2 of the best tackles in the NFL, plus really good other offensive linemen. Yeah, like the Bills have Josh Allen and James Cook and a collection of nice
Dawson Knox.
Yeah, Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox might have had 400 receiving yards this year. I think that Joe Brady is a huge swing and miss home run type hire if they choose to go that direction. He could be potentially like the next great coach. He is somebody who comes from the Sean Payton tree. He could be the person who then sprinkles the rest of the NFL with his offensive people from his offensive tree, because I think he really is that smart offensively. But there's like some huge risk there because he is 35. Almost all of his NFL experience has been as a coordinator. He's got 2 years of like assistant to the assistant experience in New Orleans, and like a half a season as a quarterback's coach.
He also is near and dear to a lot of fans around here because he was the offensive coordinator for LSU in 2019.
Well, he was like, he wasn't even the offensive coordinator. He was
passing game coordinator. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, with that
really
offense, we probably could have called
He was the architect for that offense. He wasn't the I think Ensminger was the actual play caller for that offense, Steve Ensminger, but Brady was the architect, and he's the one who got them to have Joe Burrow throw for 60 touchdowns and almost 6,000 yards in a college football season. Speaking of Monstars,
yeah,
they had the Monstars in that.
That's
offense.
the thing is like I don't know how much credit you give him because the personnel was so good.
I'll tell you how much credit you give him. Like that same group of players the year before was like okay.
Yeah, it was good but not great. That's true.
Like Joe Burrow was like a fringe draft prospect the year before, and then 1 year with Brady he became the runaway number 1 pick.
The thing I remember about Brady, like when he first got on the radar screen here, was at these press conferences with Drew Brees, and Brees, he would dot the I's and cross every T with every answer, and he just randomly would unsolicited bring up Joe Brady's name, and no one even knew really who he was because he was at such a low level. We're like, who's this Joe Brady guy that Brees keeps bringing up? And for Drew Brees to bring him up means he was making an impression on Drew Brees even back then, and we started kind of. Okay, let's figure out who this guy is, this bright mind that Drew Brees keeps, throwing in when he brings up the offensive game planning they're doing. And then, of course, Ed Orgeron plucks him away. Very smart move by Ed Orgeron. I think one of the most underrated moves he made, like Luke said, and the offense went to another level. And then look,
it went beyond another. Like it went to levels that heretofore, unseen.
But I also think it was good for him to fail in Carolina. I think that's a good experience, and
he's
exactly
talked about that. Bring up.
Yeah, he's talked about that. So I think Luke's point, though, also is right. I mean, like if you're looking at this from like a perspective of could we catch a rising star on the way up and get the next Sean McVay? That's what Joe Brady would be in this coaching search.
Yeah, and because you talk about timelines lining up, these timelines do line up.
Yeah.
Because you can give Brady a long leash, let him fail for a year or two if that's what's necessary, and kind of grow into the job, and then you cut bait and maybe you're in a better position to reset.
And look, Sean Payton wasn't Sean Payton when he came here in 06. Like he grew into it. I mean, coaches grow, and you have to be willing to do that with Joe Brady because he's obviously very young.
Yeah.
So I mean, I see a lot of things to like about that hire.
There's a potential that like we're looking back on this like 10 years from now and being like, wow, Joe Brady was there and like, not everybody wanted him. And there's also potential that like he's just on some offensive staff somewhere because he couldn't cut it as a head coach.
Or maybe he's the next Cliff Kingsbury who needs to fail as a head coach once. And
there's so much room for variance here, and that's like the big risk with going with somebody like Joe Brady. I think that the floor is much, 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 much lower for him because he's just not proven in the same way that these other guys are. Aaron Glenn is not proven as a head coach, but Aaron Glenn was a player in the NFL for like 10 years. Like that counts. That matters.
Really good player.
A really, really good first round draft pick who played a long career. That counts. Joe was like like William and Mary or something like that. And like again has had very little experience. He's 35 years old. So real risky pick, but like potential for reward is like astronomical with Joe Brady.
Matt, you've been quiet. Are you preparing a rebuttal?
Well, when Teddy Bridgewater said in 2021 that the Panthers under Joe Brady didn't practice 2-minute in red zone, not great. Like, that's a pretty damning quote. Just looking that up while you guys were talking to make sure I had that right.
That seems impossible, but...
Well, he said, I can read let me pull up the actual quote.
I believe you.
It's like they didn't practice it nearly enough, but he said the words, we didn't practice 2 minutes. So I don't know. I mean, you would hope that would change, especially being around Sean McDermott, who's more of a veteran head coach than, say, Matt Rule was when working on staff there. I don't know, man. Like, it's just, there's so many unknowns with it, and I don't hate it. I just don't know if that's what the Saints really need right now is kind of the unknown. I mean, I would applaud the go for it aspect with it. I just like where this team is at. Can they afford to really take a chance on that? Maybe because they've been stuck in the mud and let's try something completely new. But it's just hard for me to look at that situation and just not say, it's Josh Allen. But he did better than Ken Dorsey did, and
yeah, no doubt.
Kind of see, lost another job this year with Cleveland.
I'll say this one other final, maybe caveat, and certainly a feather in his cap. I'm pretty sure of the coaches of the candidates, he's the only one I know firsthand that has been to Snake and Jake's and had beers.
Okay. Fair point.
And that would be definitely a feather in his cap.
That would be, honestly.
Okay, so those are the top three candidates. We feel pretty good that there's maybe a better than half chance the Saints' choice comes from those three candidates,
unless all three take jobs elsewhere.
Well, that's where I'm going.
Like
quickly before we go to predictions for the divisional round and take a break, I do want to, and that maybe that's a whole other podcast. We'll see what happens over the next week, Luke. But Joe Brady could decide that he's going to be like Ben Johnson and needs one more year in the oven. Mike McCarthy could go to Chicago where he's enamored with Caleb Williams. Aaron Glenn has already been reportedly like he wants to go to the Jets. So it is very possible that they end up with none of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before that. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable to say the Saints have the least desirable job on the market. And I think it was a little disconcerting to hear Mickey Loomis say he doesn't have to sell it. They do have to sell this. Like, yes, it's one of 32 jobs, and they need to be like, it's like, yeah, we're gonna go pick our guy. It's like, yeah, but like, out of the 6 jobs available right now, like Yells isn't. There are a lot of problems with the Saints' job.
Yeah, though if Ben Johnson wants the Raiders' job, I am willing to reconsider anything.
That's true.
And
but
like money talks.
If I'm Mike McCarthy and I'm like we've already talked about, I'm in my 60s, and you look at, okay, the Bears want me, and the Bears Bears very much are in on Mike McCarthy. Like they were trying to interview him before he was even let go of his contract with Dallas. From like Bears or Saints, like okay, Bears have a lot of problems with like the ownership side of things and everything, but like Caleb Williams and like $90 million cap space, Derek Carr negative $70 million cap space.
Yeah,
like if I'm Joe Brady, like okay, Trevor Lawrence, do I get to be the guy who fixes Trevor Lawrence and have this roster with a lot of cap space, even if like they've got issues with the owner and Trent Baalke, or the Saints issues? Aaron Glenn is a candidate everywhere, and maybe he doesn't. There's a lot of problems with the Jets too. We've talked about their team owner is like part of a presidential administration. They have a more uncertain fate at quarterback than anybody else, but like they've also got like blue chip players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You can make a lot of things work with. So
what happens then? Does that bring Darren Rizzi back into the conversation? I mean, Cliff Kingsbury has said he doesn't want to be a head coach. Maybe you go change his mind. Kellen Moore is a candidate. Like there's other guys out there, but and again, maybe this is a whole nother podcast if these guys do indeed go off the board. But just quickly, 30 seconds, where do you guys think the Saints turn in that case?
That's a good question. I mean, it's not what anybody really wants to hear, but I think I'd probably take Rizzi over Anthony Weaver or Mike Kafka.
I think I would too. I think I'd go back to Rizzi, but
Kellen Moore.
I think Kellen Moore's going to be the coach of the Cowboys, and if he's not, I think Kellen Moore would probably be my.
Yeah.
I think I'm coming around a little bit on Kellen Moore, but I think he belongs firmly kind of behind these guys that we talked about today.
Yeah. I think Anthony Weaver is like he's the defensive version of Joe Brady, fast ascending coordinator who already maybe failed in one stop, has done an impressive job, has really ascended through the ranks quickly, can connect to players. I think he's kind of an interesting one to watch of the next pool, even though I like Kellen Moore. We went over that the other day, but if he takes the Dallas job, I think Weaver, like, rather than and Rizzi too. If Clint Kubiak takes the Seattle job, like for the offensive coordinator, I don't really know what Darren Rizzi's staff would look like, and that's a huge question.
I don't think we know what Darren Rizzi's staff would look like, regardless. Because he never got a chance to put it together.
Speaking of Rizzi, the Broncos special teams opening coach.
Yeah, there's multiple. So he's going to be in high demand if he's not a head coach.
Yeah, if he's not a head coach, he'll probably be gone. Jeff, you have any other thoughts there?
No, I just think if it's not one of these three, it's going to be hard, I think, to sell the Saints fans. I think those are the three that would maybe excite Saints fans, and if not, it's going to feel like a backup. You're going to Plan B, and this time they need something to be excited about. So, to me, it would be kind of difficult to get Saints fans on board, even with Riz, who we all like and I think would be probably the best option if you can't get one of the top three. But there might be somebody out there. I mean, the one thing I would say is there could be somebody we don't really know. There could be some candidate on one of these staffs that's in the playoffs that's, they're waiting on. So I would say that, we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Okay, we're going to take our last break and be back and wrap the show up with some divisional round NFL playoff predictions after this.
The Saints.
If I'm the Cowboys, I would go
We're
for
back
Marcus Freeman.
here on the Saints Insider podcast. We just kept talking through the break about this.
Yeah, that's okay.
We could do another podcast about this. So we do want to wrap things up with divisional round playoff predictions. These are going to be brought to you by Associated Grocers. Join our team and help support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. And I framed it this way, guys. Not going to go through all four games individually, but let's save Bills-Ravens for last, which is the best game, and the TV network saved it for last as well. Of the other three games, you have solid favorites. Chiefs and Lions, I think, are 8-point 8.5-point favorites, and then the Eagles are like
Chiefs are 8-point favorites. Eagles are 6.5-point favorites, and the Lions are 9.5-point favorites.
So you got 3 solid favorites. Out of those 3 games, do you see an upset? And if so, what is the one?
Come on, Matt, are you gonna do it?
I'm not going to do it.
Come on,
But
man.
if I were to pick an upset, it would be that game.
Why is that?
The game is the Lions versus
The Commanders, left hand up. Yeah, I mean, Jaden Daniels is like the clutchest human alive, and if that game comes down to the final 2 minutes and Washington has the ball, they're gonna win.
Do you know what I heard today? That Washington is 87% on 4th down this year.
Yeah.
87%. Now you can look at that one of 2 ways. You can say Jaden Daniels is unreal in the clutch, or you can say that's completely unsustainable. It almost cost him last week.
I was stressed out writing gamers for this season. The last 5 Commanders games have literally come down to the last snap.
It's unbelievable.
It's
87%.
a writer's nightmare. That's
All right, any other votes for an upset?
I'm gonna take Rams over the Eagles.
That's the one I like.
I don't.
And I just really like the Rams. I liked them a lot last year. I think they lost to Detroit in the playoffs last year, if I remember correctly. Was that right?
Yeah, that's right. First round.
I really liked them last year. They drew a tough game in the first round, but I just think Stafford is unreal. I think their young defensive players are playing really, really well. And I think Philly, for as much as they have offensively and defensively, quarterback play is a little worrisome for me, for them. And it hasn't really mattered this year, but like I think that sort of stuff matters in the playoffs.
And I think if the Eagles get out to a lead, it's going to be tough for the Rams because then they're going to have to stop Saquon, which they could not do in the team's first meeting at all.
Yeah.
But if they get out to a lead and they can force the Eagles maybe to be in catch-up mode, and I'm not sure Hurts is healthy. I still think he's bothered by that concussion. He didn't look good last week, so that's my pick too. That leaves you to make the case for the Texans, Jeff.
No, I think that's going to be a blowout. That's the one game I think is going to be really lopsided. I think Houston's one and done. They got their win. I think Chris Jones will eat up their offensive line. I
That could
think
be low scoring, though. The Texans' defense.
I
pretty
would
solid.
say, though, about the Lions Commanders, that should be a fun game to watch as far as like both coaches go for it on 4th down a lot. They may not punt either team. I mean, that'll be a fun game. But Luke nailed it. I mean, the Rams, I think, are sneaky in that game. First of all, I think it's a huge coaching mismatch, head coach. I think McVay's way better than Sirianni. So.
Yeah. Okay, that leaves Bills and Ravens. It's the Sunday evening game. Honestly, Super Bowl caliber matchup here. Might be the 2 best teams left if you look at DVOA and those sorts of things. It's in Buffalo. The Ravens are favored by 1 point. So let's go around the room. Who you got?
Go back and forth. Kind of like Buffalo. I can't really shake the Lamar postseason stuff. He was awesome last week, but I think Lamar will play well. Just Buffalo because of the home thing.
Okay, I was going to go Buffalo also. I was all Ravens earlier in the week, and then I started thinking how are we forgetting that Buffalo's at home? And I don't know. I mean, it's a great matchup. I could see it going either way. I do think Sean McDermott tends to come up with wrinkles, and we saw these teams play earlier in the year, and the Ravens just annihilated them. But the Bills had Matt Milano and a couple of other defensive injuries, and I think they'll come up with some kind of wrinkle that at least slows Baltimore down enough for them to get out to a lead.
So I think the Ravens are going to win because I think they are built for the postseason, especially this version of them with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in the same bat. I mean, there was a drive last week against the Steelers, a very good defensive team. I think they ran, 13 or 14 consecutive running plays, like an 80-yard touchdown drive. Like, they're just doing this stuff at will against good teams. That said, my heart wants Buffalo because I want to cover a Lions-Bills Super Bowl.
Oh, my God.
Because I think that would be friggin' amazing in a couple weeks here in New Orleans. That's what I want to cover, but, I will accept any Super Bowl I get to cover.
I will also say Lions Chiefs would be pretty cool because of the storyline of the upstart that's never played in the Super Bowl against the team going for the first three-peat ever. So
yeah, no, I just want to see the mishmash of Lions and Bills fans in the French Quarter.
it'd be crazy.
And just like all of them being like, "Can you believe we're here?" I want to see that.
That would be-
personally.
it would be a lot of
I don't want to see. Look, I'm sorry, Chiefs fans. I don't want to see any of you in the Super.
The Chiefs have done enough. We've
I
seen
don't.
enough.
I think the three-peat storyline is actually really fascinating.
First team ever.
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't care.
What do we know?
Lions, Bills.
The one thing I don't know is the weather supposed to be a factor in Buffalo. I mean, I know it will be a
cold,
factor.
but not overly
snow?
windy or snow or anything like that.
Okay, I kind of. It's funny you all hit on all the things I've been thinking. Like I actually think this Baltimore team with Derrick Henry is much better suited to advance because I think it takes some of the pressure off Lamar when you've got that running game.
Sure.
I hate to go against my Louisville boy, but like I got to pick Buffalo at home. I mean, they're so hard to beat up there. I think, and they're kind of on a mission. I think they've come up short a few years. I think whoever wins this game is going to beat Kansas City.
I agree.
I think whoever wins
100%.
this game wins the Super Bowl, to be honest.
Well, you're going out on a limb there.
Yeah.
You can have that on the offshore. What's the offshore odds of that?
I mean, I don't even think you have to go offshore for that.
Oh, you don't?
think
You
you
can
can
bet
just-
right now?
Yeah, sure you can. Who's going to
Yeah,
win?
I think this
We
game's
we
going to
start
be.
our John Harbaugh only wins New Orleans Super Bowls storyline now.
I think it's going to be an awesome game, though.
I agree.
I mean, two just heavyweights.
Yeah,
going at it.
it's really the first must-watch of the playoffs. You got to see it, and then hopefully both conference championship games will be good, and that'll lead us to Super Bowl 59 here in New Orleans.
And Saints fans can watch Joe Brady's offense in action,
you
kind
go.
of scout it out.
Okay, so that's going to do it for our show today. We'll be back next week with more. You can check us out on NOLA.com/Saints. Speaking of the coaching search, Luke has something up this morning about basically what we talked about today, the favorites, the next contenders, and the case for them, why they may or may not want to come to New Orleans and all of that. So check that out at NOLA.com/Saints. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. You get all the Saints Insider episodes, also press conference videos, locker room interviews, all that kind of stuff throughout the year. So for our producer, Norman Bell, he's Matthew Paris, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan. I'm Zach Ewing, and we'll see you next time.